Jada Pinkett Smith, Cleopatra. Ah, yes. Another opportunity to demonstrate to you the narcissism of Jada Pinkett Smith. You remember just over a year ago, we had the infamous Will Smith-Chris Rock slap around the chops. And I explained to you what really drove Will Smith's behaviour, and thereafter explained to you what she is and what he is. If you haven't embraced that excellent series, then you really need to go and look in the mirror and ask yourself, why am I such a bad person for not engaging in HG's material, and then go and remedy it, and thus salvation will be yours. But to those of you that have accessed it already and have absorbed the lessons contained therein, huzzah! Congratulations. But of course, here's another opportunity, courtesy of the union of the mindset, the narcissistic mindset of Jada Pinkett Smith, and, of course, the woke setup of Netflix that tells us Netflix's Cleopatra enrages Egyptians by casting black actress. Ah, yes. Remember all the brouhaha that goes on these days, whereby you aren't allowed to have a white person taking a black role. No, sir. That's naughty, naughty. And that you're not allowed to have a straight person playing a homosexual person. Oh, no, sirree. That also is a big no-no. You're not allowed to have a particular character played by someone that they aren't. Which then, of course, leads you to this question. How the fuck do you cast someone to play the role of a muscle-bound, extremely angry, green-skinned man or creature that goes by the name of Hulk? Where are you going to find that person from? Oh no, you can't get Lou Ferrigno with his muscles and then put green body paint on him. That's cheating. That's wrong. You're doing a Hulk out of the role somewhere. Hulk lives matter, you know. And also, how is it that you haven't got somebody who was bitten by a radioactive spider to play Spider-Man? Surely you're doing legions of individuals called Peter Parker who've been bitten by spiders out of their roles. It's absolutely awful. And why didn't you go and find a really tall individual with massive ears to play the big friendly giant, instead using CGI for it? Well, that's just cheating, and I think that's trampling all over big friendly giants' rights, if I'm going to be quite frank about it all. Why aren't we up in arms about all of that? You see, the simple fact is, films, television, plays, they involve this thing called acting. Yes, acting. So the fact is that, believe it or not, Bryan Cranston isn't a very intelligent chemist and teacher who cooks crystal meth behind the backs of his family and ended up causing the death of his brother-in-law. No, surprised? I thought you might be. He was acting. Yes, and guess what? Gary Oldman wasn't actually a prime minister that got Britain through the Second World War. No, he's an actor. And they made him bigger, and they used prosthetics to make him look chubbier. And he changed his voice to sound like Winston Churchill, because it's acting. Yes. And so the funny thing is that you can, of course, decide that you could have anybody playing these roles because it's acting. And rather than getting offended and saying, oh, you've cast a straight person as a homosexual, that's doing a homosexual out of a job, just think, no, it's acting. And of course, they make such a stink about all of this, but then show their rampant hypocrisy by, in this instance, whereby we know that Cleopatra is actually Ptolemaic Greek, but what happens is, we'll have a black lady playing her because that's allowed. Oh, right, hang on a second. I thought you were all for authenticity. Why don't you cast a Ptolemaic Greek person in that role? There must be plenty knocking around. No? Oh, you want to have it this way because it's your choice now to cast a black actress. And of course, it's no surprise that one of the individuals that behind this decision is Jada Pinkett Smith. An article in the Times by Kieran Gare tells us the British star of a new Netflix programme about Cleopatra has defied Egyptian critics who have claimed the legendary queen should not have been cast as a black woman by saying they don't have to watch it. Ah, okay. But isn't that what people say to the wokists when they get themselves all bent out of shape with regard to what Roald Dahl has written? Don't we say to them, don't get worked up about it. If you don't like it, if you're offended by it, not that you should be, but if you are, don't read it. But then you say, wokest narcissists, oh, we've got to change it. Not reading it's not an option. But now you can turn around and say that. Adele James, who's faced racist abuse, which is ridiculous, in recent days, is to play the legendary Queen of Egypt in a new docudrama series chronicling the life of the world's most famous, powerful and misunderstood woman. Oh, I thought that was Harry's wife. But the choice to cast James, who previously starred in the BBC drama Casualty, as Cleopatra, has infuriated some Egyptian cultural leaders and reignited a centuries-old debate about the ancient ruler's racial profile. Zahi Hawass, the archaeologist and former Egyptian Minister of Antiquities, accused Netflix and the show's executive producer, Jada Pinkett Smith, of falsifying facts. He said Netflix is trying to stir up confusion, to spread false information that the origin of Egyptian civilization is black. This is completely fake. Cleopatra was Greek. James's castings as one of the history's most consequential rulers has even inspired a lawsuit in Egypt. This week, Mahmoud al-Samari, an Egyptian lawyer, filed a case against Netflix, accusing the streaming service of attempting to rewrite history by choosing to depict Cleopatra as black. The complaint, first reported by the Egypt Independent, an online newspaper, states, most of what Netflix platform displays do not conform to Islamic and societal values and principles, especially Egyptian ones. James, however, appears to have no patience for the debate. If you don't like the casting, don't watch the show, she tweeted bluntly in response to the escalating row. Last week, the promising young star who studied drama at the University of Bristol described the impact that she hoped her casting will have on young people all over the world who look like me. Young viewers will get to grow up seeing the greatest leader of all time being portrayed by a black mixed woman, even though it's historically inaccurate, on one of the biggest streaming services in the world, she wrote on Instagram. I can't wait for you to meet our version of this beyond formidable queen and to see our retelling of her incredible life and profound global impact. Once again, you see this agenda of it's a retelling, we can do what we want. History, schmistery. We're not bothered about accuracy as long as we tick the boxes on quotas and we are allowed to do what we want. The film industry has long depicted Cleopatra as white, with actors such as Hildegard Neal, Claudette Colbert, Elizabeth Taylor, memorably, and Vivian Leigh portraying the Egyptian queen's appearance as Caucasian on screen. However, Cleopatra VII, lover of Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, adapted by Shakespeare and George Bernard Shaw, defies 21st century categories of nationality and race. Scholars generally agree that Cleopatra was Macedonian Greek on her father Ptolemy XII's side, with some Persian too. The ethnic origin of Cleopatra's mother, however, remains unverified. This has strengthened the idea that the Egyptian ruler was of mixed heritage. Commenting on the making of Queen Cleopatra in February, Pinkett Smith said, "We don't often get to see or hear stories about black queens, and that was really important for me as well as my daughter." Extension of self, character trait acquisition. She added, "The sad part is that we don't have ready access to these historical women who were so powerful and were the backbones of African nations." Netflix, meanwhile, has not shied away from the racial politics that surround Cleopatra's race. The creative choice to cast a biracial actor to play her is a nod to the centuries-long conversation about the ruler's race, the streaming giant has said. Given that Cleopatra represents herself as an Egyptian, it seems strange to insist on depicting her as wholly European, said Sally Ann Ashton of the Department of Antiquities at the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge, who was interviewed in the series. The heritage of ancient Egyptian monarchs is often unclear, but we know much, if not everything, about Cleopatra's racial background. A descendant of the Ptolemaic dynasty, Cleopatra was of Macedonian Greek heritage. Ptolemy came 8 generations earlier, but the wives of his heirs were also Greek. Cleopatra's grandfather had 2 Macedonian Greek wives and 1 concubine of unknown origin, but we don't know which woman was Cleopatra's grandmother. Cleopatra's mother, meanwhile, was one of her father's 5 high-status wives, a description that suggests they were either Greek or Egyptian. The consensus is that Cleopatra was either Greek or part Egyptian. Ultimately, this is another example of the way that certain narcissists have this agenda to enable them to say and do what they want without due regard to accuracy. But then, another instance is to cry foul and say, oh, you must have the accuracy. And it's no surprise, of course, to find that a narcissist such as Jada Pinkett Smith is involved in the actual production and, of course, utilizing it as a way to extend her own control over people by agreeing with and causing a misrepresentation to appear on screen. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.